DawgNation, Dylan Raiola, say it with me, DawgNation. Dylan Raiola is a Georgia Bulldog. That was the headline for this week, probably the headline for the rest of the month for Georgia football recruiting. But welcoming everybody in to Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Welcome DawgNation homepage. Welcome Facebook. Welcome YouTube. Welcome Twitter. Welcome Twitch. I believe that covers all of our bases. This is going to be a monumentally mammoth edition of Before the Hedges. You guys know that we start off and we have our big five. Well, probably could have been a big 9 this week, big 8 this week. Had so much to cover, had so much to get through. And I'm going to do something kind of right now. First of all, everybody Before the Hedges is brought to you guys by Kroger, longtime partner. If you guys want to get down and get your Kroger coupons, go to Kroger.com/sign up for all your 5-star Krogering needs. Now, I'm going to do something our crack producer, Kaylee Mansell, doesn't even know I'm going to do, and that is go off book and go off live. We've got a great show with lots of things going, but there's something I want to start out with. And before we get to the big 5, we're going to do a quick 5. And I mean quick 5. I know you say when Jeff says quick, it's not that quick. This is going to be quick. These are 5 rapid, extremely rapid, like as fast as Dwight Phillips runs, things that I'm going to say right now about Georgia football. I'm going to try to get 5 things accomplished in about 30 seconds. So let's see, here we go. I don't have any worries about Peyton Woodyard being a Georgia Bulldog. I know he's going to take his official visits, folks. I wouldn't worry about that. Peyton is a dog. Same thing goes for Ellis Robinson IV. He's going to visit schools. He's going to give quotes. It's story-generating season. People are going to get their headlines. They're going to entertain other fan bases. They're going to get their page views. I still think Ellis Robinson IV is a Georgia Bulldog as well. I think there will be a decommitment on this current Georgia 2020-24 class. This will be the highest-ranked UGA recruiting class of all time. And then in number 5, I think the craziest thing about this recruiting class is we're in the month of May, and Georgia has commitments from Arizona, Connecticut, and California already right now in the class of 2024. Those are your quick 5. Now Kaylee can stop wondering and worrying about what the heck I'm doing, taking this ship off course, everything for DawgNation land. But I thought those are kind of some quick hitters where everybody's going to wonder, hey, Jeff, I want to know about this. What do you think about this? So if you're in class and you're sitting in the front row, you're watching at home on YouTube or any other streaming platforms, you got some quick juice right out the gate. Now, big 5 time, everybody. Put 5 hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care. 5 fingers in the air. We're going to talk about the big 5 things that are going on right now with Georgia football recruiting. Of course, we're going to get to that massive scavenger hunt happening this weekend where Georgia's hosting 5 official visitors. Never seen that before in my years of covering Georgia recruiting, where Georgia's getting 5 officials tucked in for scavenger hunt weekend. But first, we got to give the man his due, Dylan Raiola. Check out this graphic our Casey Dunn made for that commitment. And folks, this was one that folks have been waiting on. If you're in my business, that's one of those things that you know the fan base is going to get a jolt at it when it happens. I deem this to be a true rainmaker level commitment. If you see right there, whatever you do, do it from the heart. That is a Bible verse that is near and dear to Dylan's heart. Colossians 3:23. I believe that's out of the Christian Standard Bible right there. Number 1 overall player, 6'3", 220. He's now the highest rated commitment in Georgia's class. Number 1 overall for 24/7 Sports Composite. I believe he's the number 7 overall commitment for, overall prospect for this cycle on on3.com. He's still the nation's number 1 quarterback. And we want to talk about this. I wrote about this earlier this week on DawgNation about, everybody likes dominoes. Everybody likes that term. I just think Dylan Raiola is going to make a splash. He's going to make a big splash on Georgia football recruiting. I said earlier, he is a rainmaker level commitment. And what I mean by that is that guy is going to bring a lot of rain, a downpour of other interests with other top targets. I think it puts Georgia in an enviable position with a lot of key offensive targets in the 2024 cycle. And really, I think the splash is kind of like a Jordan Davis cannonball off the high dive at the Ramsey Center. That's how big I think it's going to be for this Georgia class. You heard me say earlier in the quick 5 that I do now feel the way things are matriculating already, that this will be the highest rated Georgia recruiting class of all time. And don't take my word for it. Let's take we're going to call this some fancy pull quotes. Look at this pull quote right here from Ellis Robinson, previously the highest rated commitment in the Georgia 2024 class. Mentioned earlier that I don't think folks have much to worry about with him taking his visits, but UGA class is going to be crazy. Best class in UGA history, maybe college football history. So Georgia'd have to hawk down Alabama of a year ago and Texas A&M of 2022 to claim that honor. And then look at this one right here from a 5-star wide receiver. That's what Raiola is supposed to be able to bring for the Dogs. He said, really, Wingo told me that the commitment to Raiola didn't affect him that much, probably because he knew what was going on. But he said it doesn't change him that much with Georgia. But he said, I know if I choose to go there, I have a great quarterback. Cool sentiments right here. One thing, folks, I got to marvel at just a little bit here with the Raiola news, and this is where I try to put things into perspective. If you would have asked any Georgia fan years ago, they would have been like, Georgia needs to sign the number one quarterback in the country, and then the national championships would follow. Well, Kirby Smart's got his own little blueprint, his own little way of doing this. The way the Dogs get down is they win 2 national championships in a row, and then they end up getting the commitment and signing the nation's number one quarterback. Shows you what Georgia's about defensively, but that's also why Raiola is so important. I think Georgia's classes the past 2 years have been their best 2 years of defensive classes in Kirby Smart's time, which we can go ahead and say ever. But what has to happen with this class, and this is why Raiola is so crucial, is he's got to bring in those wide receivers. He's got to bring in those running backs. He's got to bring in those offensive linemen, where Georgia on the offensive side of the ball needs to get really heavy-handed. I mean, offensive slanted class. This needs to be the year where the offensive playmakers, the offensive explosive firepower 5-star guys is just as good or even better than the side of the ball on the defensive side, because everybody knows that's what a Kirby Smart team is going to be built defensively. They're going to be stout. They're going to be strong. I want to take you to 2 more quotes. These are the ones I'm just going to read out. But Sammy Brown, by the way, shout out Sammy Brown. I call him Captain America or Captain Uncle Sammy because I think he's the All-American in everything. Regarding the Raiola commitment, this is what Sammy Brown said this week to DawgNation. I thought it was cool. Georgia is a perfect fit for him and his talent. Will be great to see him succeed. He also said, when I asked him, hey, man, what do you think that does for Georgia? How do you think an offensive talent helps the program or enhances the program? And Sammy Brown said, and maybe this seems a little bit about the way he looks at Georgia, he says, I think it brings competition. Many say that the linebacker is the quarterback of the defense, so I would be potentially competing with him every day. Interesting couple things. Casey Poe, who's going to be an official visitor to this weekend, says, I think it's an awesome pickup. He's an awesome player, and we'll create competition no matter who else is in the quarterback room. Cam McKell, another official visitor. We're going to hear more about him a little bit later. I asked him, I says, what does he think about Raiola to Georgia? And he says, he said, I'm happy he found his home. I honestly didn't think he was going to go there. But then he asked about the offense, and he says, I think the offense will be really dynamic. Guys, that is your Raiola effect, the Raiola splash. I think it's going to be tremendous. Why don't we just take a look at this graphic right here? I've put together some names, and you want to know, Jeff, Rainmaker levels commitment sounds pretty good, but this is a show. You got to show us stuff. So these are the names right here that I think Raiola to Georgia moves the needle for. And what I could say there basically is I think Raiola to Georgia puts Georgia either in a pole position or a top 2 position, top 3 position, where without Raiola, I don't think that they would be as pronounced. Jeremiah Smith, the Ohio State commitment right there, number 1 wide receiver in the country. Number 2, folks, if you follow the 24/7 Sports Composite, what Georgia is trying to do there is not only flip Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, but also eventually sign the number 1 wide receiver and the number 1 quarterback in the country that are also rated number 1 and number 2 nationally. Kirby's got his weight belt on for that one. Brian McClendon has his weight belt on for that one. Mike Bobo has his weight belt on for that one. That's pretty hard. And then you got Ryan Williams, a guy that I believe is going to be in town this weekend as an unofficial visitor for the scavenger hunt, the number one wide receiver in the country for 2025. He's out of Saraland, Alabama. He is an Alabama commitment right there. KJ Bolden. I think Raiola helps with KJ Bolden because KJ Bolden wants to play at a type of program that's going to have a future first-round pick at quarterback, getting better, working against him every day, offensive side, defensive side, for the nation's number one safety. The same thing with Edric Houston. I think the momentum of Georgia helps here. The impression that Houston has of Georgia as the gold standard, the elite, the best of the best go to play to Georgia, I think Raiola to Georgia enhances that. Now, here's a guy I think Georgia jumps into without Raiola. I don't think they had a puncher's chance at all. And I think that's Micah Hudson, an electric wide receiver out of the state of Texas, number 3 wide receiver, number 16 overall in the country. Guys I know in the state of Texas, guys that run the wide receiver camps, the skill camps, say that Micah Hudson is better than anybody that's came out of the state of Texas at receiver, perhaps since Jackson Smith and Najigba, which is an amazing feat right there. I don't think Georgia still doesn't even have an official visit set with Micah Hudson, but I think Raiola in Athens recruiting for the Dogs at quarterback gives Georgia now a shot there with Micah Hudson. We mentioned Ryan Wingo earlier. I think Wingo and Raiola are connected. They took unofficial visits together, to Nebraska and Georgia back-to-back in March. I think they're going to take their official visit together the first weekend in June, which will be a seismic weekend for Georgia football recruiting. Here I am hyping up this weekend right now is the biggest recruiting weekend of the year, and that's only going to last about 2 weeks, where I think the biggest official visit weekend in Kirby Smart's time, which is Georgia's time, will take place that first weekend in June. Going down the list, Jordan Davis in there. That's the number 1 running back in the country for 2025. Georgia's fighting right there with Ohio State and other schools right there. Brandon Baker, that's his teammate. He's a 2024 class. He's in the 2024 class. Number 1 tackle in the country. Jaden Riddell, another guy that's going to be in town this weekend with Raiola on an unofficial visit. That's what I'm expecting. Number 4 tight end in the country. He's the number 1 tight end in the country for On3.com. Cam Coleman, a 5-star who is terrific, folks. Some folks say he's every bit as good as maybe even Jeremiah Smith. The rankings just haven't caught up yet. Coleman took his first visit to Georgia this past weekend. He's a 5-star for other outlets, the 24/7 Sports Composite is zooming with Coleman's stock, but right now he's still the number 11 wideout, the number 59 overall prospect. He got some good FaceTime with Kirby Smart and BMAC over the weekend, felt like a priority, and that's a former high school teammate of Georgia freshman corner A.J. Harris. Nate Frazier, the number 8 running back in the country, also out of Mater Dei. You look on this list, Jordan Davison and also Nate Frazier are also going to be in that list right there. All teammates at Mater Dei High School out of Santa Ana, California. And then finally, Christian Clark, young man out of Phoenix, Arizona, Mountain Point High School. A big running back target for Georgia in the 2024 cycle. And Christian Clark already heard from Raiola basically the day he committed and everything else. So that right there, you got your splash for the 2024 cycle and beyond. That's how much I think Dylan Raiola to Georgia, especially a public Dylan Raiola to Georgia, really helps the Dogs. If you guys have been following Before the Hedges for a few months, I believe I moved Raiola to the number 1 top target on the grid for the Dogs, maybe early March, maybe back in March. That's when I felt comfortable. From covering this recruitment for a while, I got to spend some time with Dylan Raiola working out in Arizona back in February. Just the things I've heard. I kind of can share some of it now. One of the things I've heard is way back, I guess in January, I was talking to Peyton Woodyard and I was talking to Dominic Raiola and his family, and they were talking about how those two young men who are already now public pillars of the Georgia 2024 class, that it would be great roommate material, like the type of guy that you want to grow up in college with and play against. You heard that thing. Then you started hearing all the time about when Georgia would get a commitment, there would be a text or there'd be an exchange of messages basically the same day for the 2024 class for Dylan Raiola, where he was acting like he was already a committed guy to Georgia behind the scenes, kind of lobbying effort and everything else like that. Lots of things that go on. And then I was still stuck in my mind. I don't know if it was I guess it was just a feeling and a gut instinct from doing this for so long, but I was watching Dylan work out back in February, right around the day after, I believe, National Signing Day for the 2023 class. We just started talking. I told him kind of what I felt the Georgia eventual class would look like, and he kind of took that in, and he thought about what he kind of thought the guys that he probably felt were going to wind up as Georgia Bulldogs as well. And I just got the sense from Dylan and what he said back to me that he knows that there's going to be something special building in Athens, and it would be very important for him to be a part of it because it would be awfully hard to deal with the Dogs in the playoffs and in big football games in the future, competing against the guys that would eventually be a part of the 2024 Georgia recruiting class. Folks, that's Dylan Raiola. There's so much going on. We probably could have done a whole show on the impact, on the crater that this decision will make on the Georgia 2024 football class, but that's not what the Big Five is all about. Let's put up two fingers right now, going on to number 2. Oh, yeah, by the way, like I said earlier in the show, the headline of the show, this is the biggest recruiting weekend of the year so far for the Dogs. Scavenger hunt. And I got to give you a quick synopsis on scavenger hunt. If you don't know what the scavenger hunt is, it's something the Dogs do every spring, every May, where they bring in key recruits. And they could be elite recruits in the current cycle or maybe 1 or 2 years out. It's been going back to, I think, since Nolan Smith was a sophomore in high school. I think Nolan went to 2 scavenger hunts. Keely Ringo went to a scavenger hunt where that famous viral photo with him and Sunshine, the python of Brian Gant, Georgia staffer Brian Gant, was around his mom's neck because Keely wouldn't put that around his neck. But what Georgia does is it's a unique way, a novel way to do a campus tour where you got to kind of find things on the campus, take selfies on the campus with guys like Kirby Smart. You've got to visit certain areas of Georgia. You got to put together puzzles some year. You got to race against the other prospects that are there, which are divided by position groups. Everybody's in golf carts. There's some wild golf cart races going around certain parts of the UGA campus. Folks are hiding keys. Folks are kind of blocking off golf carts where people can't get out. It is very cutthroat. Usually the tight ends win that, but now you know a little bit about the scavenger hunt. That's the backstory. Here's the real story. Who's going to be in town for the scavenger hunt? Let's pull up this list of official visitors, guys. First of all, for me, never seen official visitors for the scavenger hunt. Never seen this many official visitors at all. And you've got 5 in town this week. Jeremiah Smith, number 1 receiver in the country, number 2 overall prospect, currently an Ohio State commitment. If you spoke to him this week, a lot of Ohio State reporters got some feedback on him. Of course, Jeremiah Smith was having fun on Twitter. But he essentially said he's still locked in. He's going to take his visits. He's scheduled visits to Florida, Georgia, Penn State. He's competing right now in the Florida State Track Championships, running the hurdles, running the 400, I believe. Really strong all-around athlete, Jeremiah Smith. And for him, I think as long as Day stays there, Heartline stays there, I think it's going to be very hard to move Smith off of Ohio State. That's perhaps why Raiola is going to be in town this weekend helping to recruit a guy like that, helping to build that relationship further. You also got Casey Poe. Casey Poe is ranked as the number 147 overall prospect in the class, but he's got officials set to places like Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia, which shows he is a priority target. 6'4", 295, a former Texas state champion in the shot put. And really, when I talk to Casey Poe, he sounds so Southern. He sounds so down to earth, so steeped in football like your aunt's Earl Grey teapot or whatever. But he's a Stacey Searles guy to me. Like if I had to put together a voice track and a character sketch of what a Stacey Searles guy looked like, that would be Casey Poe. The only thing maybe that's not ideal is he lives in Texas and he's not in northwest Georgia, up around Floyd County and around Rome. Third official visitor, Cam McKell. Again, this is the first official visit for a lot of these guys. McKell, who has ran a 10.50 at the state track meet as a sophomore. He ran a 10.62 qualifying. Terrific player. McKell is a type of guy, 6'1", 187, basketball player, track guy, football guy. He's the quarterback for Statesboro High. This year he's going to be a slot receiver. I think he's rated a lot higher. He's worth a lot higher in terms of a prospect than he's rated right now, and he's still the 156 overall prospect in the country. I think some of the sites have him as the number 26 player in the state of Georgia for this cycle. Folks, I don't think there's 10, maybe 11 players in the state of Georgia that I would say that guy's probably clearly a better prospect than Cam McKell, and that's saying something because the state of Georgia is loaded this year. McKell is an outright dude. Then you got a pair of 3-stars. Marcus Harrison's probably the one not a lot of folks know about. He's from New York, 6'8", 310. He's a 3-star. He's seen as a Wisconsin lean. And Wisconsin, his dad actually played at Western Illinois growing up. Wisconsin, he's already got some crystal balls. He's named Wisconsin as his outright leader, or should I say Wisconsin, to be true to that region of our wonderful country. Crystal balls have gone to Wisconsin. I think he's already taken 3 trips to check out Wisconsin so far this year. And then Colton Heinrich, a basketball player. The guy's got a 4.4 GPA. He's out of Cardinal Gibbons High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 3-star, probably rated number 35 tight end in the country. Number 30 tight end in the country on 3. 6'4", 232. I mentioned his great GPA. They throw the ball a ton at Cardinal Gibbons. They always have. He caught, I think, 3 touchdowns last year, 35 balls for about 350 yards. Those are your 5 official visitors for this weekend. But, hey, when I say it's the biggest recruiting weekend of the year, the Dogs have had some weekends that top that already. I can think of the national championship celebration. I can think of a couple weekends in March maybe. But behind door number 2, folks, check out the unofficial visitors. And this is where this thing gets some granddaddy long legs. Dylan Raiola, expected to be in town this weekend to recruit Jeremiah Smith, Jaden Riddell, and others. Look at there, Ryan Williams, we mentioned him earlier, number 1 overall receiver. Folks, let me tell you a little bit about Ryan Williams. He's committed to Bama. Seems like a strong commitment right there, but the Dogs are going to try their darndest. Ryan Williams, you guys might not know my career history, but I spent a lot of years covering high school sports in Alabama. I was on the committee that helped pick the Mr. Football Award in Alabama every year, and Ryan Williams won that award last year as a sophomore. He is expected to be the best player in Alabama for the next 2 seasons. He's about 6 feet. He's about 170 pounds. He had 42 total touchdowns, over 2,700 all-purpose yards. I think 15 of those touchdowns came on the ground. Think about this, just on jet sweeps and other type of designed runs to get Ryan Williams the ball. He also caught something around 25 touchdown passes. Ryan Williams, when you hear the folks that know high school football in Alabama, still know a lot of those guys. They've been telling me about Ryan Williams for about 2 years now, and they say this, kind of the holy grail of high school football players in the state of Alabama. The very best of the best was David Palmer. Now, he played more than a generation ago, came out of Birmingham, came out of Jackson Olin High School, and if you ask a lot of longtime football coaches in the state, longtime football writers, reporters in the state, they would say that the most undeniable football talent was David Deuce Palmer. Now, Deuce Palmer went on to Alabama, was part of a national championship team at Alabama. He went on and played for the Minnesota Vikings. But they say Ryan Williams, best player, state of Alabama, especially with the ball in his hands since David Palmer. And, folks, you don't understand how huge of a compliment that is. KJ Bolden, we mentioned him already, 5-star out of Buford, expected to be back in town to Athens. I think this is trip number 15 for KJ Bolden. Zion Grady, folks. Now, look at this. 5-star, state of Alabama, class of 2025. 108 tackles last year. He's going to be in Georgia this weekend for another visit. Zion Ziggy Grady, 108 tackles. I think he had 37 quarterback hurries and 22 sacks. He is the number 1 edge in the country for the state of 2025. The number 2 linebacker in the country for 2024, that's Justin Williams out of Texas. Jared Smith, the number 4 edge in the country, 6'5", 230, and the Dogs are going hard in the paint to pull him out of the state of Alabama. Jared Smith is a 5-star. Nikar, the Georgia wide receiver commitment out of Moultrie. Colquitt County, the number 45 overall prospect. He's in town to go scavenger hunting. Jaden Riddell, we mentioned him earlier, a key tight end that I think Raiola helps the Dogs with a lot. He's in town this weekend. Another unofficial, Dwight Phillips Jr. You're going to hear about him more later in the show. number 81 overall prospect in the country. He's been busy with track, spring track. He is expected, I spoke to him over the weekend. He expects to be in Athens this weekend. And then another top 125 overall prospect. Again, on the unofficial visit side of the ledger, you've got Joseph Jonah Ajanye. He's called Georgia his dream school, and some published reports leading up to this unofficial visit. I believe he's a number 11, number 14 defensive lineman in the country. He is teammates with Justin Williams. Those two guys are making their unofficial visits on a scattered, smothered, covered, chunk, dice, capped, Kroger-sized official visit weekend, unofficial visit this weekend for the scavenger hunt in Athens. Those prospects are going to go on a scavenger hunt, and the dogs are going to go on a prospect hunt trying to build relationships with key elements in the 2024 and the 2025 classes. Woo! Like I said, folks, I feel like we've already done a big 6, big 7 right now. Third on the list, we do this every week. What does the edge recruiting look like? That's the question this week. We had defensive linemen last week. We've had tight ends in the past. We've had offensive linemen. We're going position by position on the field to take a look at what the recruiting glance looks like for Georgia in 2024. It's time for those terrifying, double-fanged edge pass rushers right there. This is Georgia's edge recruiting glance. I guess it probably starts with Colin Simmons. Colin Simmons, folks, he's out of the state of Texas. He's a number 1 edge prospect in the country. He's only back 6'2.5". Really good, tight friends with Micah Parsons, who plays for the Dallas Cowboys. I think this one is going to be a NIL heavyweight recruitment. Colin Simmons is going to take a lot of official visits. Texas A&M, Texas, Georgia. LSU has always been a team to watch there. Going to be hard for the Dogs to win that one, but that's part of the overview right there for Colin Simmons. Dylan Stewart, a guy that I'd felt better about Georgia's chances were maybe a month ago. Number 2 overall edge in the country for 24/7 Sports. For the On3 industry ranking, he is their number 1 overall prospect. For the On3 pure rating, he's the number 1 overall prospect for On3 for the 2024 cycle. I think the Dogs are in that. Ohio State's in that. Michigan's in that. I think Miami's in there a little bit. South Carolina's actually in there a little bit. I think the Dogs are still in the thick of that, but that's going to be a tough pull there. Jordan Ross. Now, this is a guy rated as a number 5 edge prospect in the country. Super fast. He told me he clocked a 4.4 in the 40 on the laser in the Atlanta Under Armour Regional. Jordan lives in Alabama, but it sounds like he wants to leave the state of Alabama. The Dogs are recruiting him hard. He is going to be on the official visit weekend for the second weekend in July, folks. That one's also crazy loaded right there with all the prospects in there. Jordan Ross is a guy that I think Georgia has a good shot at winning that recruitment. Clemson, other schools are in there as well. Marquise Lightfoot, I love this name. Big man out of Chicago, 6'5", probably 230 right now. Number 8 edge prospect in the country. Lightfoot, love that last name. He is a guy that just drips athleticism. Coach Uzo Duribe. Now, this is Coach Uzo Duribe's work in the 2024 class. He did so well in 2023. It's going to work against him. You hear a lot of thoughts where other schools are preaching against Georgia's depth that they put together in the 2023 class because they still got Marvin Jones. And then they just signed Samuel Mpemba. They just signed Damon Wilson. They just signed Gabe Harris. That's something that's going to work against the Dogs with a lot of these guys and Uzo Duribe in 2024. Jamonta Waller, love this prospect. He's a national champion, a 2-time state champion out of the state of Mississippi. Probably, in my mind's eye, the best defensive prospect to come out of the state of Mississippi since Nakobe Dean. I would probably throw Sunshine Suntarine Perkins in the last class in there as well. Jamonta could kind of be like a Jalen Walker type guy. He's rated as an edge prospect by the National Services, but his frame, kind of 6'2" or so, 220 pounds, indicates that he could be an inside backer. But folks, guy's got a step, guy's got a burst, guy can put his foot in the ground and go. If you look at his film, you watch that sucker and you think that guy, somebody's got some of those plays on fast forward, or it had some George Lucas CGI magic on there. Waller's a player I think he could help the Dogs at either linebacker or at the edge position, kind of like Jalen Walker did on third downs for the Dogs last year. C.J. Jackson, love that young man's story, wants to be a pilot. Didn't have any real offers until Georgia offered at the end of his junior year. Now everybody in the country wants him, the number 8 edge in the country for on 3. C.J. Jackson still didn't even have a ranking on 24/7 Sports. That's why we had to use the on 3 ranking right there. In-state guy, I think that's a recruitment. The Dogs are right in there because how consistently they've recruited him and they've made him feel like a priority even when he wasn't really high or really nationally known with other schools. And then a guy that's visiting this weekend as well, Dominic Nichols. He's the number 31 edge in the country. He's still a 4-star. This will be an unofficial visit out of Maryland for this weekend. He's rated around the number 400 level prospect in the country. As of right now, there are a couple guys I think Georgia could still get in with. I think there's a key visit coming up at the end of May from Brian Robinson. Man, that guy's a special athlete, special prospect. But we'll have to see where Georgia moves the dial for Brian Robinson after that visit in May. Folks, any questions? What do you think about that? Just to give some context to this, because I try to share as much with you guys as I can. I don't expect Georgia to get 2 of these names on this list. They would be lucky to get 2 of these names on their list. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe the right 2, and then it would be, clap your hands, smack your hands together, and that would be done. Folks, the Big 5 rolls on. That was your edge recruiting glance as we see it right now here on Before the Hedges for the class of 2024. Whew. Gosh, got 2 more to go. And we went so fast and furious, it felt like another sequel to that movie franchise through the first part of our Big 5 that we're going to kind of slow things down a little bit. Not going to overwhelm you with information right here. The 4th thing I want to talk about, we can call it history for the state of Georgia in Class 7A track. I got to witness it this weekend because I thought Dwight Phillips was again going to do something very special, and it turns out he did. Take a look at this tweet right here. Dwight Phillips finished 2nd in the Class 7A state track meet. It was the fastest state final in 7A Georgia state history. To put that into perspective, coming into this spring track season, the fastest 100 meters ever in the state of Georgia was a 10.19, and that was accomplished by Tyreek the Cheetah Hill back in 2014, I believe. Dwight Phillips, the Georgia commitment, who wanted to go super low to win his 2nd straight state championship this past weekend, he pulls up in the prelims. I think he ran a 10.3 something in the prelims with a bad hamstring. And the story was, I like to be there for things like that. Was he going to go? Because he had a bad hamstring last year, and he went and still won the state title. How much did he have left? Well, Dwight Phillips had a lot left. Look at that time right there, 10.24. That was his PR. He did this, what he told me was on maybe 70%, 80% of a hamstring issue right there. He ran his personal best. The thing was Oklahoma signee Chris Nelson, who is a senior, he's going to a full ride in track for Oklahoma in the which will eventually be the SEC. But Chris Nelson's about 5'9", 5'10". He weighs about 160 pounds. Dwight Phillips is about 5'11". He weighs about 175 pounds. Dwight Phillips didn't win. Dwight Phillips summoned up the best he could, and he said, I love the way he handled it. He's like, you know what? Got to handle this one like a man. Same way I would try to handle a victory. I got to still handle this the right way. Folks, the thing about this is you watched him run, and there was no way he was near 100%. No way he was near 100%. And the mind kind of took over and willed himself to the fastest 100 meters he's ever ran. I would call it a fussy hamstring. As the tweet states, these 2 times are the fastest in Georgia's 7A. Those are now both among the top 10 times in Georgia high school history. While all this was happening, to show you how fast the athletes are in the state of Georgia, there was a young man, and I believe in the prelims up in Rome, who set the new Georgia state record when ran a 10.16 in the prelims. And then he didn't even win the state final in his classification the next day. Shows you how fast these young men are in the state of Georgia. Dwight Phillips sounds really committed to come back. I don't think he will enroll early at Georgia because he's got unfinished business now at the state track meet in Class 7A. And just when you thought that's a neat little Dwight Phillips is a dude story, or Dwight Phillips, sure going to enjoy having him on your sidelines and in the Georgia backfield one day. After that, when it looked to me like Dwight Phillips was spent, he said, of course, I'm going to run the 4x100 with my team. Didn't tap out, warmed himself up, got some training, got some stimulation. Probably about an hour later, ran the 4x100. And folks, both hamstrings were shot by that point. He said he ran that race at probably 50%, 60%, because he couldn't let down his team because they had qualified, and they were chasing a state championship in the 4x100 as well. His Pebblebrook team did not win the state. If you saw, I got the chance to witness it, because I will always think of this as while I covered Dwight Phillips. As I got the chance to witness this, Dwight Phillips was basically running off one leg for the last 20 or 30 meters of that 4x100 relay. He was actually running in the same, the second anchor leg, which was right near major Georgia target KJ Bolden as well. But what you saw, grit, fierce, determination, willpower, summoning your best, even though your best is not available. Really like the chance to see what Dwight Phillips Jr. has to offer. He's going to train even harder. He's going to work even harder. And he's got his sights set on running a 10.00 flat as a senior. I think he can do it. I'm not going to doubt many things that Dwight Phillips Jr. tells me that he can do. Number 5, and I feel like we've already spoken about a couple of superheroes so far in this show. We've talked about Dylan Raiola and what he could bring to the Georgia class. We shared that effort, that noble effort by Dwight Phillips Jr. at the Georgia High School Association State 7A track meet. Now I want to talk to you about the Dogs offering Superman in the 2024 class. That's the 5th part of Big 5 right there. I got a big chuckle about that. I love superhero movies. I perhaps think that some of my acumen as a writer or in the classroom or on standardized testing, I owed that to reading a lot of comic books growing up. So if you want your kids to be get a chance to score pretty high on the verbal, have them read comic books growing up. But take a look at this right here. Now, I want to see how smart you dudes, you folks are. You smart, super smart, intelligent viewers, audience here for Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I want you to look at that name, and I'm going to give it an obligatory 10-second pause. The name is Kal-El Pascal. I've hinted it a little bit. Tell me why that's pretty stinking cool for a guy like me that loves superhero movies and still thinks fondly of the time he read a lot of comic books growing up. Kal-El Pascal. That name, first of all, there's so many stories here. He was just offered by the University of Georgia. He is a 3-star cornerback out of Florida. Fran Brown has been recruiting him for a couple of years now. Georgia finally drops the offer on him. Kal-El Pascal. That is, everybody knows Clark Kent, right? Everybody knows Superman, right? The big blue S, truth, justice, and the American way, all that. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. Well, the Kryptonian name in the comic books and in the movies for Superman was Kal-El. Now, I know I've got Kaylee Mansell behind the glass interested right now. She's going, what? First of all, super cool that Georgia is recruiting a kid whose name is Kal-El. The bigger story for me here is I had to find out the genesis of this name. Now, first of all, the dad loves comics, loves Superman, loves superhero movies. He wanted to name his son Kal-El. And somehow, I don't know if anybody needs a sales job, but I would probably hire Kal-El Pascal's dad as a salesman, because he convinced his wonderful wife, we're going to name our kid Kal-El Pascal. Oh, and by the way, it's Superman. It's out of the comic books. I mean, I've been doing this for years and years and years. And when a name like that, it's going to be a story on DawgNation. Everybody's going to be like, oh, wow, what's he rated? I don't care. This is one of the coolest offers, one of the coolest, most original names I've ever seen. And I've probably written, covered in my 20-something years as a journalist. I thought I'd clicked off every name in the book. Folks, that is the first Kryptonian name I've ever seen. Hopefully the guy gets an NIL deal with DC Comics or something down the road. Can you imagine the edits when he visits or he commits anywhere, whatever, or if he's on a SEC football team? And folks, it's been a good week for him. This is not just a good human interest story. I think Auburn's offered him this week. Texas A&M's offered him this week. See how those guys followed the Georgia lead. But I even love how the name rhymes. Cal L. Pascal, 4.55 in the 40. He's probably, if he would fit into the Georgia rotation one day, I think he would be a slot. But he plays all over the field for his high school. He's going to graduate early. Fran Brown has taken an interest in him for a couple years now, for a little while now, and he offered him this week. Georgia offered a Kryptonian, or at least the dude with a Kryptonian name this week, and I think that is a perfect way to give everybody 5 and to finish off our big 5 right now. Guys, we got a lot of show to get to. Let's just jump right into it. As my good buddy Brandon would say, let's dispense with the pleasantries. This is your 2024 class breakdown. Does anybody know what's different this week? This is kind of like Where's Waldo? It's got a little top heavy now. There's one 5-star on the offensive side of the ball. Guys, I've said many times, Raiola is key to bring offensive balance to the Georgia 2024 class. Georgia has had 2 slobber-knocker back-to-back defensive classes. You want to get your 5-star receivers. You want to get your 5-star tight ends. You want a top-rated lineman. You want some more incredible running backs. That's what you go about doing right there in the 2024 class. The thing that's different, this question came up a lot, where they're like, hey, Georgia had the number 1 quarterback in the country before, the number 1 prospect in the country before. That was Justin Fields. We saw how that movie ended. Here's what's different. Justin Fields did help put together a class. He did a great work putting together the Georgia 2018 class, which currently still stands as the greatest recruiting class in Georgia football history. He got offensive lineman Jamari Salyer to join him. He got outside linebackers Adam Anderson to join him. Cade Mays, offensive lineman. Brenton Cox, edge rusher. Luke Ford, tight end. Zamir White, running back. James Cook, running back. Everybody wanted to be a part of that Justin Fields class at Georgia. But there weren't any 5-star receivers. And that, folks, is where I think Dylan Raiola can be different. Dylan Raiola can bring in a 5-star, can be a major part of the push and a major part of the attraction for Georgia to flip perhaps 5-star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, or for Georgia to get in the hunting match with 5-star wide receiver Micah Hudson, and especially for Georgia to capitalize on an already strong relationship with 5-star Ryan Wingo. That is the potential that Dylan Raiola's commitment, Dylan Raiola commuting as Dylan Raiola recruiting now as a public commitment for the Dogs. That is all in play now for Georgia in the 2024 class. Wanted to share that little bit of insight right there. Defensive breakdown. Not much has changed. I mentioned earlier Ellis Robinson. He's going to visit schools. Miami's really trying to flip him. He's going to take his visits. He's going to have really nice things to say about how everybody's recruiting him. In the end, I just think the man's going to be a dog. Same thing for Peyton Woodyard down there as well. And right now, folks, as impossible as it may sound, where Georgia could get potentially K.J. Bolden, number 1 safety for a lot of services. Jalen Hayward is the number 2 or number 3 safety for most of the services. Peyton Woodyard is visited, plans to visit Ohio State, plans to visit Alabama. He's got family roots in Alabama. Peyton Woodyard's a dog as well. I think he's going to take his visits. He's a super nice young man, extreme, true gentleman. Pleasure to work with and to share his story and his recruiting story with folks. But I think Peyton Woodyard's going to be a dog as well. I think eventually he was going to wind up being a roommate with Dylan Raiola in Athens as well. That's some more insight as we move on right there. That's the class breakdown with a lot of emphasis on the offensive side. Georgia, hard to believe that Georgia had fell to number 4 in the country with its class until Dylan Raiola became a public dog. Now they have 12 commits. They move back up to number 2 nationally. 7 offensive commitments, 5 defensive commitments, 7 out of state, 5 in-state commitments. I said this earlier in the show in our quick 5. It is mind-boggling for a guy like me that does this every year that we are in the month of May and Georgia already has commitments from the state of Arizona, the state of California, and the state of Connecticut right now. Of course, Ryan Puglisi is from Massachusetts, lives in Massachusetts, but he goes to a boarding school in Connecticut. That is the national drawing power of the G right now. 3 commitments are actually even beyond the SEC footprint. Those were those 3 guys I named right there. Georgia now has 2 offensive players with Raiola among their 5 highest-rated commitments, and now they have 5 of their 10 highest-rated commitments are on the offensive side of the ball. Georgia, folks, repeat after me, needs to get offensive with this 2024 class, and we mean that in the most pro Mike Bobo call up some big ball plays type of way. That, my friends, is your 2024 recruiting snapshot. I feel like we've done all this. We've said all this. Now it's time for top targets and a brand new top targets list because, you guessed it, Dylan Raiola is now off the board, folks. The number one guy is off the board. Your new number one is Edric Houston out of Buford. Look at that two-pack right there. Can Georgia break the Buford curse or that Gwinnett County curse with top prospects? One of the things you see there with Georgia, a lot of Georgia guys are now kind of stacking up that list right here. Let me see if I can cover them. Justin Green, we finally told his whole story, how he put on like 48 pounds, turned himself into a warrior, kind of like Batman putting on that Dark Knight suit to go against Superman. Justin Green turned himself into a national top 100 prospect. You see Ryan Wingo right there, Jaden Riddell visiting this weekend, unofficial. Cam McHale visiting this weekend, official visit. Sammy Brown, we mentioned him earlier in the show, just threw up 405 pounds on the power clean this week, and he is a junior in high school. Daniel Calhoun, Jeremiah Smith moves to number 9. Brandon Baker, Nathan Frazier, and Justin Scott. Instead of like adding another name, we took one off to get that top targets list maybe down to an even dozen, not a baker's dozen anymore. Those are your top targets. If I had to add a new name to this list, to the top targets list, I don't feel quite comfortable doing that yet, but let's look just off the list at the top remaining targets that I think, listen, there are guys on this list. There are a lot of guys on this list that are going to end up committed to the Dogs. I think they're definitely on Georgia's radar. If you look off the list, probably the number one name I would think about, might want to bump him up or think about bumping him up to the top targets list. I think this is the first name on this list now. It's Aiden Breland. That's a 5-star defensive lineman out of Santa Ana, California. Modern day. We got a lot of modern day vibes, a lot of Buford vibes for Georgia's closing kick here in the 2024 recruiting cycle. You look here, you see some names on this list. You've got Justin Ross out of Vestavia Hills. That's a name that I think Georgia needs to really get in close with, needs to really make a push with. He was part of our edge package and our edge rushers right here. Other names on the list to think about, you've got I actually moved Dylan. You guys were thinking about this earlier. One guy that dropped off the list was Dylan Stewart out of Washington, D.C., Jordan Thomas, Jamonta Waller. A lot of these names showed up on other things right there, but you look at this list, you've mentioned Christian Clark, Amari Jefferson. That's a receiver that had some very nice things to say about Georgia adding Dylan Raiola this week in the class of 2024. Look at those lists. Casey Poe is going to be visiting this weekend. Jordan Ross, we mentioned him earlier, out of Vestavia Hills. William Satterwhite, an interior offensive lineman out of Ohio. That's a new name on this list. He put Georgia in his top 8 as well. Folks, got to catch your breath. Those are your top targets. Those are your off the list. And now, guess what? After all this, it's time for a live Q&A. This is the back end of our show. You got a question? I've been in the show. I've been looking through the comments, trying to answer everything as I go by. Tell you one thing I'll do, tease it. One of the first things I'm going to talk about while I wait for questions to populate is I'm going to tell you how Georgia is going to try and give Bama a taste of it. That's really interesting right now. Let's talk all about it right now live here on Before the Hedges. What's that?
The iPad and its fault for it takes so long to charge. I tried charging it in my
.com. We're just working here, trying to get everything going in the home office. How's everybody right now? Everybody remembers. Let me start with the tease that I had, because I would say turnabout is fair play. Does everybody remember? This is the Georgia-Alabama story. Does everybody remember? I'm sure you do. In 2023 class, when Alabama came in and they took near 5-star Justice Haynes, they took 5-star Caleb Downs, they took top 100 overall quarterback Dylan Lonergan, 3 really plum prize prospects out of the state of Georgia. Well, it looks like, considering the work that the Dogs are putting in right now, Turnabout is fair play because that's what they're trying to do in the 2025 class in Alabama. Think about this for a second. You've got Jared Smith. He's going to be in town this weekend in an unofficial visit. Jared Smith, Georgia is recruiting him really hard. That's out of Spain Park High School in Birmingham. There's also a young man named Ryan Williams. Everybody remembers him, right? Number 1 receiver in the country. I spoke to you guys about that. That's the number 4 overall prospect in the country for 2025. He's in the Mobile area. Georgia's working very hard on the flip with him right there. I thought it was very interesting how Ryan had some published comments this week, how he said, if I'm being honest, I believe this came from UGAsports.com. I believe they had a good story on Ryan Williams recently, but I believe Ryan said that if he's being honest, the Dylan Raiola commitment is a factor. And then also you've got Zion Grady, Ziggy Grady out of Charles Henderson and Troy. Phenomenal prospect, number 1 edge in the country. Georgia is trying to do those same type of things, invade the Yellowhammer State, and come back with a trio of 5-star prospects in the class of 2025. And if that would happen, all would be fair in love and SEC football and 5-star recruiting. That, guys, is what I'm saying right now. You guys got any questions? Drop them in there right now. I'm going to take a lap around the world right now. I'm going to take a look at Facebook. I'm going to take a look at YouTube. I'm going to take a look at everything else that's going on. How's everybody doing tonight? Let me see. Randy Hall. Yeah, Georgia is everybody's coming to Georgia for OL, the 2025 class. Hey, Bama's got already commitment from a really good offensive lineman out of Evans, Georgia, in Mason Short. Hugh Nash, what's up, man? Daniel Holtz. I think Georgia has several silent commitments in multiple classes. Tom Lavelle. Mike Matthews is a heck of a player. I think right now Georgia's chances are better with other 5-stars. Right now, Randy Hall, question about William Satterwhite. So William Satterwhite, I think Georgia's made a really good impression. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable saying Georgia's top 2, but I feel comfortable saying Georgia's probably in the top 3 or 4 right now with William Satterwhite. Really interesting young man. He's an offensive lineman, grew up playing a lot of basketball, loves basketball. He's going to give Georgia, very likely going to give Georgia an official visit. He's going to cut his 8 schools down to 5, maybe within the next month or so. Let me see. Question. Going through a bunch right now. So Marshall Colbert, I saw your question there about first I see a question from Leon White. Leon White, I think Georgia's going to try and bring in 5, especially if it's the right 5 in this class. They are going to turn over a lot of receivers after this season. Think about this for a second. You know, you got to see a guy like Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint, Lad McConkey. I think Dominic Lovett is a one-and-done player after this season in Athens. Arian Smith, you can kind of say the same thing for there. I think they're going to turn over at least 4, maybe 5 receivers off the 2023 team this fall. So I think there are going to be a lot of openings for receivers. Marshall Colbert, your question is, people do it differently. The On3 industry ranking, where they rank all the teams in terms of who has the strongest recruiting classes. On3 does it a new way, kind of an innovation here. What they do is they try to they rank them not on quantity but quality. That's what their algorithm says. So the more higher rated commitments are going to fare better on the team rankings for On3, where the 24/7 Sports team composite, like at a school like Michigan, I believe that still has 4 more commitments than the Dogs. They're number 1 in the country right now because you get points for every commitment, whether it's a lot of 3 stars or something else. So Leon and Marshall, hope I answered you guys' a question. David Drury has a basic football question about safety and corner. The defensive back is kind of a general term for anybody that plays on the back end of the secondary. Corners are the guys that line up on the edges. There's also slot or nickel corner. I think that's what I mentioned about Cal El Pascal would be a great fit for him at Georgia should he choose and wind up playing for the Dogs. That's the guy that would line up on the slot receiver or the he'd be called corner. That's a guy can kind of play all over the field, kind of be a walk-up safety and also become the tight end slot receiver. Corners are traditionally a guy that's on the edges
often in man coverage, and safeties are the last line of defense. They can walk up a free safety or a strong safety, depending on the side the tight end's on, and those guys are helpful not only in kind of a bracketing on the receivers, but also deep coverage, playing the middle third, but also coming up and flying in for run support. Lots of different types of safeties. Georgia has seen excel to this point. I think Nitro's going to get his 4-star fairly soon. I think he's going to probably wind up the number 75-ish overall prospect in the country. I do think that Nightcar will stay committed as well. Let me see. More questions. Okay, that's a lot of questions there. Reginald Johnson, man, that's a good question. I don't think 10 is possible. I think the modern record is 8. 10 is going to be really hard, but I think the over underline for 5 stars for me in this class might be 7. I think that's where Georgia can potentially get in this class, and I know that's saying something. Tom Lavelle, I don't think that there's a good shot of flipping Mason short. I think Georgia's going to go after guys like David Sanders Jr. They're going to prioritize him. They're going to prioritize Juan Gaston as well. They've already got Micah DeBose. And for the longest time, I will be honest, it felt like Mason just really loved Alabama from the jump. Don Wynn, yeah, you're right. Certainly needs that. Alan Verbont, I think that's a good question. That's going to take a lot, man, because I think, Alan, the thing with A&M's record, besides the NIL stuff that's important to them, is they got 18 guys among the top 100, which is substantial. I think they had 8 5 stars as well. It's going to take some re-rankings for a lot of guys. You got to remember, I think Nitro Companies, as I said last week, I think he gets ranked. I think he gets boosted. I think that'll help his class to get up there in that 327, 328, 329 range. Still a long ways to go. Georgia's also going to have a punter. Very likely to have a punter in this class, so that'll also make it harder. The fact that they have 2 quarterback commits is also very good, and you should also look for a re-ranking for Puglisi as well. And I'll say this: we had a lot of interest, we had a lot of information, we had a lot of appreciation here, kind of covering the Dylan Raiola commitment. Deserving, worthy, going to help the dogs, going to be a great bulldog, and all that. But let's be mindful of the fact that Ryan Puglisi fellow is a pretty special young man too. Every time I talk to that young man, I feel like almost I kind of felt sympathetic for Ryan this week because for him, the sky, he's always had blue sky in Georgia. But then when the Dylan Raiola news dropped, a lot of reporters were just doing their job. It's not very likely you see 2 prospects that are rated as highly, 2 top 10 quarterbacks stay in the same class, especially when one of those guys is a number 1 overall quarterback and the number 1 overall prospect in the country. But Ryan has always had a very mature attitude. When everybody called him and said, "Hey, is the sky still blue?" Nothing had changed, and he just loves Georgia. He wants to play at Georgia. He knows if he goes anywhere else, he'll have to compete with guys older than him and younger than him. So why not go where your heart is? And his heart has been in Athens, Georgia, for quite some time. Let's see. Facebook, I took a there you guys, and then let me see if I can take a quick lap around those fun folks over there on YouTube. Hey, folks, I really appreciate you watching this. Certainly, Ducati Tech. Now, that's a good question, and I've had to tell a lot of folks this. And sometimes when I'm spitting out information, I always try to be very mindful, but it is Dylan Raiola. So think about if you're a connoisseur of whiskeys, think about bourbon, think about rye, think about Catcher in the Rye. But if you want to sound smart, you want to sound amazing, you want to sound like the smartest guy at the tailgate. Without trying to sound really snooty, you got to say, "Hey man, I know it's weird. I know everybody messes it up, but the last name is Raiola." And folks, you're gonna have to get used to saying it. All I gotta say. Jermaine King, I didn't think of that, man. For you, Jermaine, I'd like to salute you there. And I knew, Jermaine, you would have to like that story about Kal-El. Jermaine, let's be honest here now. Be honest with me, brother. With your avatar like that, with your sigil like that, you had to know about Kal-El, right? Tell me you did. Tell me you did. Bobo said Peaches is somewhere around here. Low Elo Joe, I think it's funny. I think the Raiola story is going to get back and forth. Is going to get is going to have the sea legs of maybe David Green and David Pollock playing Little League football. Mike Brown, good question. I think that they'll probably 4 because I think Georgia's going to have a great opportunity to clean up other positions. Who do I think for sure are close commitments coming? Raiola, UGA boy, very different. Well, I think he's connected to a lot of folks. I think the major folks he's connected to are Brian Wingo, the receiver, punter, do everything athlete out of St. Louis. I think Jake Riddell really wants to play with Dylan Raiola, or at least a quarterback like Dylan Raiola as well. Randy Payne, thanks for those kind words earlier. Thanks to everybody. I love all those Peaches shout out. Randy Payne wants to know about running back. Well, right now they've got Dwight Phillips committed at running back. The number 8 running back in the country is Nathan Foster. Georgia's actually after 3 or 4 players from modern day high school in Santa Ana, California. That's the same high school that produced JT Daniels. So the running backs, man, and I'll be honest, with the addition of Lynette Whitehead, a great actor, a great young man, this week, a preferred one now at Athens Academy. He spent the last 2 years in Tennessee and had some bad injury luck when he walks on. They've got a lot of guys that are big, tank-looking guys. Kendall Milton, Andrew Paul, knee injury, Branson coming off the injury. Roderick Robinson, Deuce as well, looked very good during spring practice. They got a lot of hard to get on the ground, fast, great athlete, big backs, going to pop some tackles, going to run between the tackles. I think they're going to concentrate on this class, and what he's going to concentrate on is getting a lot of guys with that wiggle and that shake, kind of like James Cook. That's what Dwight Phillips Jr. brings. We mentioned the name Nathan Frazier. I think Christian Clark's another guy like that as well. Low Elo Joe, time travel. That's what we're trying to do as well. See, Jeff McGill. That's a very funny one. Very funny question right there. Let me see. Well, guys, I think it's been a long show. A lot going on. Like I said, we could have done a Big 12, Big 10. So many things going on in our Big 5. I want to thank you guys for hanging out tonight. We had time in the studio. We also had time for me to get home and everything else. Certainly hope everybody enjoyed the program. If you guys liked the show, if you appreciated the show, if you could give thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or just a emoji up if you guys are on Facebook or another platform. Thanks for hanging out again on Before the Hedges. It's every Wednesday night, brought to you by Kroger. I'm going to be on the road the rest of the weekend. I'll come back with some great content to share with you guys as well. Folks, we got superhero references. We got Dylan Raiola references. We got Cal L. Pascal as a part of our show. This is our send-off. Deeply from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank everybody for joining us. You got a lot of things to do with your Wednesday night, a lot of places you can get your Georgia information. I'm very grateful that you guys chose to do it here and with everybody with our team at DawgNation. Thanks to Michael Carvel and Kaylee Mansell, the 2 producers that really make this show go. They're really possible. I'm Jeff Sentell. That has been your Intel. Everybody be well, and we'll see you guys again later on the pages of DawgNation. Thank you, everybody. See you later.